a really impressive resume, really impressive just last several years of your life. I just first want to start off by asking you your journey to the Department of Justice. Um, when and where did that start, first of all? And then what were some of the obstacles getting to that point as a Black woman?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So that is a very packed question. So I am from right here in Texas, did elementary school here in Dallas, spent some of my later years in Houston, graduated from the University of Houston, and I actually did a year of chiropractic school before law school at Texas Chiropractic College. Only did a year, I didn't graduate though. So transitioning from having a focus in the sciences into law, which requires a lot of analysis and deep thinking at law school, it was a little difficult to transition in that regard. But I always knew that I really wanted to make an impact in that being in the legal profession was the best way for me personally to make that impact. So I did a lot of studying, a lot of self-reflection in order to make that a possibility and a reality to become an attorney. So the way that the Department of Justice happened, I was in law school in Lansing, Michigan. I went to Thomas M. Cooley Law School. And I knew that I really wanted to do my last semester as an internship. It's one of the best ways to gain experience. And you can kind of figure out if there's an area of law that you like or that you don't like. I saw the opportunity at the Office of the Pardon Attorney, and I had a lot of doubt, what we now know is imposter syndrome. But I still went ahead and applied for the internship, and I got it. So I went to Washington, D.C., and I did the internship, and I worked really hard, and hard work never goes unrecognized. I was asked to apply for a position as a permanent attorney after I left the internship and did a judicial clerkship. And that is how my journey at the Department of Justice's Office of the Pardon Attorney began way back in 2008.
Wow. And you worked under three different administrations. As a girl growing up from Dallas to this woman now in DC, working under these administrations. Talk about that experience. I mean, that's three different administrations, and some of the obstacles that you face.
Yes, I like to say I'm really blessed, very, very lucky to have had wonderful bosses and mentors that guided me throughout my legal profession. My very first boss, right, was the pardon attorney at the time, Mr. Ronald L. Rogers, when I interned. He was a wonderful leader and mentor and friend, and really instilled a lot of those qualities in me as far as making sure that the work that I do has a positive impact, not only within the office and myself, but also in the communities in which we serve, because working for the federal government, DOJ, you're a public servant. So you're serving the community. So he always instilled in me that the work that we do has a tremendous impact on lives that are part of our community, the American people. I also did a judicial clerkship with the Honorable Magistrate Judge Robert Bloom, and he taught me a lot about how to just have patience and listen to litigants and make sure that they have an opportunity to be heard. I think that oftentimes in the legal profession, people forget that these are individuals that are the litigants, and this is their opportunity to have their voices heard. And a lot of patience is required and an understanding of their cultural backgrounds so that the inherent biases that exist within the criminal justice system are at least being able to be addressed and tackled just by having someone who looks like me on that side of the table, listening, learning, and actually caring about what the individual is saying. So I think that, because I have been very lucky to have mentorship that doesn't just focus on the substantive work of law, that I've been able to have an impact that is positive on the community.
And I want to move into now where you are now. What led to your decision to make this historic move? What led to your decision to branch out on your own and start your own clemency law firm?
Yes, so many factors played a part in me taking this huge leap of faith in a pandemic to launch a law firm as a solo practitioner after 12 years with the Department of Justice. Listen, as we said, was there under Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations. I started my career making recommendations to the president for federal executive clemency, commutations, and pardons. After a significant amount of time there, I left and I was a federal prosecutor. So I really learned the beginning stages of the criminal justice system. What happens from an arrest to getting to the indictment to trying cases. I also was at the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. defending the government in civil matters. And a lot of people don't recognize that sometimes these criminal matters do end up in a civil matter when someone is currently incarcerated at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. There are various forms of relief that they can petition for, but it gets petitioned to federal district court. So my experience at the civil division also offered me some perspective into that aspect of the criminal justice system. So I then went strategically to understand what it really means to be at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So I spent 3 years as a senior attorney with the Federal Bureau of Prisons and really learned and comprehended and understood that process from the correctional officers to the inmates and how the interactions all impact how an individual inmate is going to behave and take advantage of the various programs that the Federal Bureau of Prisons has to offer. A culmination of all of that experience led me to believe that my voice was necessary in the empty space of clemency. So many people don't even recognize that as being part of the criminal justice system. And it is the last stage of the criminal justice system. It's forgiveness in its most simplest term. It's forgiveness. So when we talk about those inherent biases that exist within the criminal justice system, we have to include clemency because there are inherent biases that exist at that last stage, the same way it exists at the beginning stage when someone is arrested and indicted, the same way it exists throughout their incarceration period at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It also exists at that very last stage of clemency, which is forgiveness. So I not only talk about federal executive clemency and the best ways to make a strong petition to hopefully get granted by the president once an attorney favorably recommends it. I also talk about those inherent biases. And when I talk about inherent biases at that level, right, with clemency, I don't only mean, those underrepresented groups. We all know that underrepresented groups statistically, are at a disadvantage, right? But even me being from Texas, right? A lot of individuals who have federal convictions, they do not realize that once you have a federal conviction, the right to possess a firearm, you can no longer possess it. And the only way to legally possess a firearm with a federal conviction is through a presidential pardon. So it's still an inherent bias if an individual that isn't necessarily in what we typically call an underrepresented group, they still face biases if they don't have access to basic information and education about what clemency actually is, which is why I say clemency through ownership with my business, The Pardon Attorney, so that people understand that owning, right, the process can strengthen the chances of leading to clemency. Owning a business, owning a GED, or any other type of skill or trade while incarcerated. And also, most importantly, owning the fact that you did commit an offense, acceptance of responsibility. Because, like I said, clemency is forgiveness, and it's a request saying that you're sorry in the most simplest terms in exchange for that forgiveness that could reinstate some of those disabilities of civil rights, such as the right to vote, the right to hold public office, the right to sit on a jury, and the right to possess a firearm.
Yeah, and you talked about implicit and inherent biases. How much of that, and you touched on this very, very well in your last response, but how much of that impacted you professionally and personally when you noticed and picked up probably very early on in your career that this was a trend? How did that impact you?
Yes. Wow. It's one of those things where I think that a lot of not even just attorneys, right? I'm a Black woman, right? And anybody can see that. And I think that as a woman, period, there are biases that we face in the workplace. And then you add being Black, and there are additional biases. And some of them are conscious, some of them are unconscious biases, right? And there's always that internal struggle of, do I speak up? Do I not speak up? Is it me? Is it in my head? Or is it a reality? Once I got to a place of feeling comfortable with myself and understanding and realizing that it's not in my head and it's really happening, and reconciling the fact that I really love my experience at the Department of Justice. I stand behind the Department of Justice's mission, right? But that doesn't mean that I cannot call out those inherent biases that are contained in the policies and procedures, not only with how it personally impacted me and some of my colleagues, but naturally how those inherent biases transcend to the communities in which we serve, and those individuals specifically who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated individuals. I knew that I needed to be a voice and become the very first clemency reform advocate to also highlight the fact that this is part of the criminal justice system. The policies and procedures are where the biases exist, not necessarily the institution of the Department of Justice as a whole, but we need to get in positions to where, people that look like you and I are sitting at the table when these policies and procedures are being created, so that statistically it doesn't have a disadvantage to those underrepresented groups. I believed that I did as much as I could while I was at DOJ for the past 12 years. And I truly believe that I have a better chance of making a bigger impact now that I'm outside of DOJ and I'm able to really discuss those inherent biases that are contained in the policies and procedures.
What is it you want people to know now that you have taken this leap of faith and you've stepped out on your own, so to speak? What do you want people to know about what you do? What do you want people to know about clemency in general?
So it's twofold. I really want people to know that, number one, to be a senior attorney at the Department of Justice, you can have fun. You can be normal. You don't have to speak in legalese and use unnecessary words in your vocabulary to come across quote unquote smart, right? We work hard. I'm a normal person. I like to have fun. I'm a mom to a very handsome, cute little 6-year old boy. And this is me. I'm still an attorney and I'm very good at what I do. And I want anybody who is thinking about the legal profession to look at me and see my background with this rose wall and the Judge Barbie and know that, yes, you can do it too. If I can do it coming from Texas and sit at some of the biggest tables at the Department of Justice, anyone can do it as well. And then what I want people to know specifically as it pertains to federal executive clemency, I really want people to understand what clemency is. I've stated it a couple of times. In the most simplest term, it is forgiveness. Clemency is an opportunity to request forgiveness if you are still incarcerated at the Federal Bureau of Prisons or if you have been released. I really want the American people to understand the difference between a commutation and the difference between a pardon. A lot of times, pardon and clemency are used interchangeably, but there is a difference. Clemency is the word that encompasses both a commutation and a pardon. But I need people to understand the differences so when they are applying for this extraordinary grant of relief, they're at least applying with the correct petition so that they're not denied as soon as it comes in the door. And just understanding the basic concepts, whether they choose to retain me as their attorney to do the petitions for them or not, at least they have an understanding so that those inherent biases, when I talked about a lack of resource to information and education, I can address some of that just by me speaking out and talking about it in a way that's in layman's terms. And so everyone can understand it and it doesn't go over anyone's head.
Well, you have done that really well. Thank you so, so much for being a part of this discussion. I do want to ask, just because I have you, and just because I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't, with the current events, the president, and recent pardons. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Blackwater, just the controversy surrounding that. Just if there was anything you wanted to add about what we need to understand about that and
Yes.
those decisions that he made surrounding what seemed like really egregious admissions of, fraud, crime, war crime, so on and so forth.
Yes.
This is
So
just, honestly, this is just like being a reporter at this point.
I totally understand. And I really want people to understand that the process of federal executive clemency is not a political process at all. The Constitution, specifically Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, gives any president what we call pardon powers. And again, people use pardon clemency interchangeably, but y'all know better because now you know the definition, right?
Mhm.
So that area of the Constitution gives any president the right to exercise granting federal executive clemency to whomever the president chooses to do so, right? So there's a difference. Sometimes, in the media, we see where a president has granted clemency, whether it's a commutation or a pardon to an individual who never even applied through the Department of Justice's Office of the Pardon Attorney. Any president is well within their right to do that because they're exercising their constitutional right to do so. Now, that is very, very rare to be able to receive a grant of clemency directly through the president without going through the process of the Department of Justice. It's very important that people understand that to receive clemency is rare, anyways. To receive it by the president directly without applying through the Office of the Pardon Attorney is even more rare. The majority of petitions are going to go through the Department of Justice's Office of the Pardon Attorney, where I spent 5 out of the 10 years as a senior attorney at that office. So I was one of those attorneys who received the petitions. If an individual attempts to send their petition directly to 1600 Pennsylvania, which is the White House, it will be redirected right back to the Department of Justice's Office of the Pardon Attorney, where an attorney will receive the petition, evaluate it, recommend it favorably or not, and then it goes to the president. And then again, the president can do whatever they want. The president does not necessarily have to listen to those recommendations of the attorneys from the Office of the Pardon Attorney, right? Because under the Constitution, the president, any president under any administration, is free to exercise those pardon powers as it is stated in the Constitution.
Thank you for helping us understand that.
I hope that wasn't too
No,
much.
that was good. That, and honestly, that part of that question, really, I'm just curious and wanted a little bit more understanding on that, because it's been in the headlines so much.
I
But
think, yeah.
in terms of your journey and sharing about your mentorship and just your journey, your professional and personal journey, thank you so much for sharing that. And I feel like there will be people watching, especially with you having the Dallas connection, you being from Dallas, who are going to be inspired and, perhaps even reach out and want you as a mentor, or at least some guidance on what they should do to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, and I don't even think I mentioned it to you because I'm so passionate about getting this story out, and I'm equally passionate about people seeing me in my true authentic self and knowing that, listen, anything is possible.